Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is a presentation about the dangers of safeguarding, in particular, looking at technology. Okay, I'm going to revert to the PowerPoint now. So this is the last you will see of my face, which is a good thing, I think. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. We're looking at safeguarding in schools, specifically technology, use of technology. If you are doing your level 2 or level 3 support and teaching and learning qualifications, then the information in this webinar relates directly to the safeguarding the wellbeing of children and young people unit, or safeguarding the welfare of children and young people. One of them is called Understand How To, and the other one is called Safeguarding the Welfare Of. One is level 2 and one is level 3. If you're studying either of those, you will know which one you're linked to. But other than that, it's just some reminders really about the dangers of internet, particularly smartphones we're going to focus on. This is what we're going to look at, the types of technology that can be a safeguarding risk, the importance of being proactive, and our responsibility about reporting safeguarding concerns. So different types of technology that we are surrounded by in schools. So smartphones, obviously, computers with internet access, cameras, video cameras, all types of mobile phones really, tablets, iPhones, etc., iPads rather, and smartboards, interactive whiteboards, all forms of technology that have or can have access to the internet, and that brings with it lots or potentially lots of problems for children and young people. But for the purposes of this presentation, we are going to focus on smartphones. It's an ever-increasing problem in schools. It's going into primary schools now as well. Many young people have smartphones. And the problem is the lack of control that we may have over the use of the internet with these, because they come with their own data providers, with their own access to data. And as we know, it can be very difficult to control this. Whereas schools have very good systems in place to block inappropriate use of the internet. When it comes to personal mobile devices such as smartphones, it can be very difficult to monitor and to make sure that they're being used appropriately. David Bowie said, we have created a child who is so exposed to media that he will be lost to his parents by the age of 12. I think what is really interesting is when he said this. He said it in 1972, and my, hasn't that come true. I mean, the rate at which technology has developed, a lot of parents have lost the way because they're not as up to date with technology as the young people that in their house are. So I think that is absolutely amazing that he said this in 1972. And more interestingly, or even as interesting, Eric Schmidt, executive chairman of Google, said that there are only two states of children these days. They're either asleep or they're online. Even if they're waking up in the middle of the night, they go online. Quite a scary thought, and he said this 6 years ago, so it's probably even more so nowadays. And in Google, they will be able to monitor this, how many people are on at different times of the day, so that will be said with some authority. And it's very difficult, isn't it? It just is very difficult to monitor all the time what our young people are up to, particularly when we're talking about online activity. So we're living in a new world, aren't we? This is the new reality. This is a world that is all interacted with cables all over the place, and we can all connect with each other from one part of the world to the other. We can live in Britain and watch and talk to our friends and relatives on the other side of the world instantly, and it's marvellous. It is wonderful. Technology is fabulous, but it does bring with it dangers, and we do have to be vigilant to these dangers. How many of us thought that LOL was lots of love? I have to confess that at one point I was one of these people. And it's just the development of language, isn't it? This happens all the time with all language. It always changes, it's always developing. If we think about the language of Shakespeare's time, 500 years ago, to the language now, our English language has developed and changed and modified over the years. And now, with the advent of smartphones and texting, etc., and Facebook and social media, we have another variation in language, and it might be one that we're not that familiar with as adults, but I would urge you all to become familiar with it. One at the top there, parent over the shoulder, POS. I hadn't heard of that one, but I won't forget it now. An unpleasant one, I ate you, not very nice, is it? But we have to be aware that this is happening and that young people are developing different methods of communicating, not just using smartphones and technology, but also different ways of speaking and texting and writing using different formats of our language that might be alien to us. So we have to find out what it means so that we can understand what is going on in our schools. So social media, a big, big area, isn't it? All young people are involved in social media, Facebook being about the biggest. But there are others, Facebook, tweeting and Instagram are big, aren't they? And there are many, many other social media sites that young people access. But there are restrictions. Facebook set out restrictions, and the others do as well, about what age group can access their sites. And they have all sorts of privacy settings on them that should be used and should be enforced to try and protect young people who are using them when they are of the correct age. But quite often what's happening is that there are young people who are accessing Facebook who are not of the correct age to be able to do so. And in some instances, this has been done by parents who have set up accounts for their children, or more often actually, it's older siblings that are doing it for them. With the best intentions, not with any negative intentions, maybe to help them communicate with other family members in other parts of the world or other parts of the country, or grandparents even. It's not done for bad reasons, but unfortunately we do have to look at the other side of these types of social media, and we know what can go on. So we do have to respect the age limits that have been put in place. And if we are aware of young people that we are working with in schools who have access or using Facebook or other social media sites and they're not of the appropriate age, then please report it to your safeguarding person in your school so that they can then do something about it. It would be much better to report it and to know that we had done the right thing and stopped something inappropriate happening to a young person than to have turned a blind eye because we felt it wasn't really our business or it wasn't appropriate, it's not really a big deal. Everybody's using Facebook and something did go wrong. We would find it very hard to get over that if something did go wrong and we did nothing about it. So please don't feel you're being trivial or you're being nosy or inappropriate. If you know that a young child is using Facebook and they've got a site and you know they shouldn't have it, then please report it to the appropriate person. This is the age of young people that should be on Facebook, but we all know that this is not always the case. Facebook, this has come directly from Facebook's website. They require that everyone be at least 13 years old before they create an account. Creating an account with false information is a violation of their terms. This includes accounts registered on behalf of someone under 13. However, we all know that this is not regulated very well. And we all know that there are lots of people on there who are not who they say they are, who are not over 13 or not even children sometimes, but pretending to be children. So we have to be vigilant. Interestingly, the Facebook founder, CEO Mark Zuckerberg, he says that he hopes one day to be able to lift the minimum age restriction so that those under 13 can create an account. I don't know that I think that's a very wise idea, but there we go. I just thought that was an interesting little piece of information to put there. That also came from Facebook as well. So some of the risks of using social media, and in particular, we're talking about the access that they have with their mobile phones that is difficult for us in schools to moderate, because we may have limited control over what's going on there, depending on their school boundaries. But this makes, I think, quite horrifying reading. I've got quite a few slides here from the same source, the EU Kids online project that was done, looking at the problem of online activity and the risks for young children and young people. So if you look at the left-hand side and then look across the top, you see the various different risks that, and we know all these, but it's interesting just to have a read of them. The one down the middle, the sexual ones, we hear this in the media all the time, but bullying, harassment, and then even just the commercial aspect of it, the pounding of adverts all the time of, children and young people particularly, they can be very, very swayed by what's being advertised at them. And then the values as well. Sometimes it's promoting unhelpful values, unhealthful values as well. Some very, very inappropriate things going on out there in the internet, and we need to make sure that we are protecting our young people as best we possibly can. Some more risks here. I think just looking at the picture from the newspaper on the right-hand side, it's not necessarily anything wrong with the picture of it's just a headline from a newspaper, but what we have to be aware of, is it appropriate for the age group of the young person accessing it? So it's not always that the information is inappropriate in a general sense or wrong in a general sense, but is it appropriate for the age group of the young child that's accessing it? Sexting. This is a huge, huge concern, and it's been really, really, really a real huge problem in secondary schools at the moment. And the impact of this on young people is just horrendous, really, really bad. So sexting rather, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, it's sharing nude photos via mobile phones, basically. And it can be, obviously, have serious legal concerns, but it's the psychological consequences that are really, really damaging to young people. And it's, as I said, it is a huge, huge issue. If you have any concerns that this is happening in your school, that anybody may be the victim of this or may be involved in this even, please, please pass it on to the appropriate person in your school straight away, because it is a huge problem in secondary schools and it's only increasing. A secondary school that I'm familiar with, a young girl, 13, was persuaded by a boy that she had a crush on to take her top off because it would make him feel much better about life, and photograph herself topless. And she did send it to him after much debate of whether she should do it or not. And of course, the boy, being a teenage boy full of hormones, spread it to his friends, who in turn spread it to others, and so it went on and so it went on. And the impact on this girl's life was devastating. She found it almost impossible to get over. And she missed months and months of school as a result, and her learning fell behind. A bright girl. It's dreadful. And it's, although I mentioned a female this has happened to, it's happening to males as well. So please be vigilant. be aware that this is happening with our young people, and it's a growing concern. Again, if you just look down the middle there, so some of the risks to our children online with relation to aggressiveness, the violent and hateful content that they can be exposed to, being bullied and harassed, stalked in some cases, stalked verbally, stalked via the internet, even if it's not physically being stalked through the internet, and also bullying and harassing other people. This is going on, so it's just huge, really huge, and it's really troubling to young people. If you look over to the right hand side, where it gives you some statistics here, 22% of young people aged between the ages of 11 and 18 report of having been cyberbullied. And as it says there in the middle, it ruins lives. It really ruins lives. So please make sure that we are vigilant to this and use our school systems to make sure that we control as best as we can the online activity of the young people in our care while they're in our schools. So some reasons why a young person might not want to report suspected abuse. And this is some of the feelings they may have. And if we remember the age group of the young people we're talking about here, either 10, 11, just about to become teenagers by and large, or are teenagers where there's hormones a-buzzing around the body and things can seem much worse than they actually are in real life. But sometimes they are really bad. But it's a difficult time period. And if it's happening with younger children who are 9 and under, then we have real concern there, don't we? They are accessing information that is way beyond their years, and that is a huge problem. So we have to act on it. So some of their feelings could be that in some instances they may feel it's none of anyone else's business. So they can do what they like with their mobile phone. And this is the case for a lot of young people, and particularly with sexting. They don't realise the seriousness of the act. I had no doubt that the young lad who passed the photograph of the nude girl around his school and around his friends had any idea of the serious impact this would have on this girl. He may well have thought she'll be embarrassed for a bit, but she'll get over it. But to him, it was just a bit of fun. But it is serious, isn't it? The impact on that girl's life, it really is serious. It could damage her for a long time, psychologically. Often, they don't want their parents or their friends to find out. I don't know which is the worst, the parents or the friends. Given the importance that young people place on their peers, particularly when they get to those teenage years. So, and a real common reason why they don't want to talk about it. They're frightened. They're frightened by what might happen. If they're being bullied online, the bully will obviously know what they're doing and make sure that they are as frightened as possible about reporting them. So, be aware that they could be just genuinely terrified. Often, young people don't think they will be believed. They think that an adult will just assume they're making it up, or that they're exaggerating, or it's not real. So if some child or young person comes to us with something that they know about something that's happening to do with the technology, to do with someone's smartphone, or whatever it happens to be, then please make sure that we demonstrate body language and eye contact with that young person to make them feel that we believe them and that we are taking them seriously. Or they may have been threatened by the abuser. I mean, the people who do this, people online who disguise themselves as older people than they actually are, they know all the tricks, they know exactly what they're doing. And other young people who are bullying other young people on the internet all often They know how to threaten and to make sure that that person is terrified about reporting. So cyberbullying is ICT related, obviously, and in particular we're talking about mobile phones, particularly smartphones, but it's the internet access, deliberately using the internet to upset someone else. So it could be by texting, it could be by Facebooking, it could be all sorts of different ways. It's ICT, it's the use of technology, so that's cyber, but it's really deliberately using this system to deliberately upset someone else. And it can take the form of threats and intimidation, as we've already mentioned, harassment or stalking, vilification, defamation, hate or bias bullying, exclusion, identity theft, impersonation, publicity posting, sending or forwarding of personal information or images, as we've already mentioned, manipulation of images. All of this is cyberbullying. So what can we do? Excuse me. I think it's good to remember, and if you relate back to if you're doing your level 2 or your level 3 support in teaching and learning, one of the pieces of legislation that you're asked to research is the Every Child Matters Green Paper. And in particular, we're just looking here at the 5 core principles. Every child, every young person has the right to be healthy, to stay safe, to enjoy and achieve, and to make a positive contribution and achieve economic well-being. And this directly relates to internet safety. Being healthy, staying safe. Someone who has been cyberbullied is not safe, and mentally they will not be healthy, and they're unlikely to enjoy and achieve or be able to make a positive contribution. So we have to be vigilant about this. We have to make it our job. It is part of our job to be vigilant and to make sure that we can see what's going on with the young people we're working with. And if there are any symptoms whatsoever, it's much better to report a feeling that something is not quite right than to do nothing. Now, this is key, what we should do. It is our responsibility. We are local parentis when these young people are in our schools. So it is not good enough to say that we don't need to have up-to-date ICT knowledge. I'm sorry, but we do. All of us who are working in schools must make sure that our own ICT knowledge is up to date and fit for purpose. Because if it's not, we will not know what we're looking for. We will miss instances of bullying, of harassment, of things going terribly wrong for young people, all to do with ICT, all to do particularly with smartphones in this instance, because our own knowledge is not up to date. And I'm sorry, but that is not good enough. It must be. We have to, if we're using ICT all around us in the world, and in particular schools are really embracing the use of ICT, then our own subject knowledge must be up to date as well. We must make sure we understand our school's safeguarding policies and make sure that we have read and understood the up-to-date additions to these policies, particularly those relating to technology. They are upgraded regularly. Schools must do this. And you have access to these. They're either online, in some instances on your school's website, or if not, they are available from your school. But make sure that you understand it. Now, this is particularly important if you're new to working in a school. Make sure you read it and that you understand it and you understand the chain of communication that is involved should you suspect some misuse of technology with a young person in your school. If you don't know where to go or what the policy is, then you're unlikely to be effective. And please report any concerns straight away using the correct channel that your school has set in place. Now, these vary slightly from school to school. So if you've changed school, Don't assume it's exactly the same as it was in your other school. Make sure you know exactly how it works for the school that you are in now, and do it. Be proactive. Don't leave it to someone else to do. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure our children are safe. Everybody who works in that school has the responsibility to make sure that the children are safe. It's not the other person, or it's not the teacher, or it's not this person. It's everybody's responsibility. And especially online. There are more mobile phones in this country than there are people. And as we've already said, the age of ownership of mobile phones, particularly smartphones, is decreasing all the time. Primary school children often nowadays have a mobile phone and have access to the internet that we have limited control over. But what we must do is, most primary schools nowadays, if children do have a mobile phone, they insist that they are handed in at the start of the day and they're picked up at the end of the day. So therefore, that's quite good, isn't it? Because the school has good control over it, and the children, by and large, are not able to use their mobile phones in the school day. Where it can be tricky is in secondary schools, because secondary schools can have different policies relating to mobile phones, and depending on your school, that will vary quite significantly. Some schools are quite happy for children to have mobile phones and internet access on their phone and have it with them all the time. Others insist that they're handed in, like the primaries, at the start of the day and they pick up at the end of the day. Others have a kind of flexible use of it, so sometimes they are allowed to use the phone in school, but only if it's connected to the school's internet service. So they're logged in using the school's internet search engines, which means that various sites are locked and blocked. And if that's the case, then you do have some control over it. So you can make sure that they're only using those sites. You can ask them sneaky things to check up, so that you know that they've got the blocks in place and that they're using the school's block system. If for any reason you suspect that a young person or a child is misusing their phone, please use the controls that you have within your system, your school system, to do something about it. Don't brush it under the carpet or leave it to someone else to do it. As I've said already, it's everybody's responsibility. And we're protecting children, we're protecting young people. And if you think back to the illustration I gave you about the young girl, she was 13. She's a child, a vulnerable child, and yet the next few years of her life were damaged by this one silly incident that this boy probably thought was very funny. But the impact on that girl, how many years do we think it will take this girl to get over this? It will always be in the back of her mind, won't it, for many years to come. So use your school system, know your school system for phones and the use of phones. And remember that we are protecting vulnerable children. And the schools are encouraging digital learning. One of the schools that I was working with, they did encourage the use of mobile phones. They used them in the classroom. They did have good blocks in place, and children were checked to make sure they were only using the school system. So they used them as they used them as a thesaurus to check out words. They used them as a calculator. They used them as internet browsers to check up information. But it was all checked and it was done very well. But I dare say that there are some children out there, some young people out there, who would have abused that system and abused the trust that the school had given them. So you have to be vigilant, don't you? I've said here parents and carers lack up-to-date knowledge of ICT, but I'm going to actually enhance that, and I'm going to say that all adults, or a lot of adults, including teachers and teaching assistants, often lack up-to-date knowledge of ICT. So it's our responsibility to make sure that that knowledge is not out of date, that it is up to date, and that we have a responsibility to keep that knowledge up to date, to make sure that we know what the technology is that our young people have got access to, so that we can protect them. If we don't know, we can't protect them. So, thank you very much for listening to this webinar. I hope it's been interesting or helpful to you, just some reminders of the dangers associated with particularly smartphones, and particularly the sometimes uncontrolled access that young people can have to smartphones. So please be vigilant, be watchful, and look after the young people that you're supporting in your schools. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.